Good evening. I call to order this work session for the Gladstone City Council on Tuesday, April 28th, 2026. It's about 5:32 p.m. Tammy, will you call the roll, please?
Councillor Huckabee.
Present.
Councillor Mitchell.
Present.
Councillor Blau.
Present.
Councillor Labonte.
Present.
Councillor Farley.
Present.
Councillor Garlington.
Present.
Mayor Milch.
Present. Let's stand for the flag salute, please. Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
As usual, we are on Zoom, but it's a work session, so there will be no public comment, but we do have staff present tonight. And so we will get some good information from staff on the two items on our agenda. Number one, discussion of system development charges related to accessory dwelling units, ADUs. And then we will follow that up with a little summary of what happened at the League of Oregon Cities Conference. So, Jackie, let's start with item number one.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. As you recall, back in March, we did some code amendments for accessory dwelling units. And at that time, we had asked you if the council was interested in maybe reducing the system development charges for accessory dwelling units. We had provided you some information in your packet, and we got a general consensus that you would like to have a work session, which is where we are tonight. So before I have staff go over what is in the packet, I just want to give an overview about system development charges. And so when new homes, businesses, or apartment buildings are constructed, they add more people to the community. More people means more demand on public systems like water, sewer, stormwater, and parks. These systems aren't unlimited and they need to grow to keep up. And that's where system development charges come in. They're referred to as SDCs. SDCs are a one-time fee charged to new development. And the idea is simple. If a new building increases the demand on public infrastructure, the developer helps pay for the extra capacity the community needs. We collect them because growth isn't free. Expanding water lines, adding capacity to sewer pipes, improving stormwater system and streets, and adding parks all cost money. So without SDCs, those costs would fall entirely on the current residents, even though the need comes from new development. So SDCs keep things fair. Growth pays for growth. We don't have a lot of growth in Gladstone, but we do collect SDCs. What they can be used for are projects that add new capacity, such as improving our water and sewer system, improving our stormwater facilities, creating or expanding parks and trails, and improving our transportation and streets. They cannot be used for routine maintenance, staff salaries, or fixing old problems. The money is strictly for growth-related improvements. So what I wanted to also point out that in addition to the system development charges that the city collects back in 2018, we had FCS Group prepare studies for us. This one is on water and sewer system development charges. We have one for stormwater system. We have one for our park system. And we also have one for our transportation system. And if you look in these documents, it will tell you which projects in Gladstone will qualify for the city to use a percentage of SDCs on that project. In the past, we haven't used a lot of SDCs, and I've got to contribute that to probably just not having the continuity in the public works department at the director level. We have an interim public works director now who is very experienced with looking at current projects that we want to complete, looking at system development charges to see how much of that money that we already have reserved can we use to apply towards that project. So I think going forward, we will start utilizing more system development charges. I say all of that just to give you a little summary on SDCs. And then as we start talking about accessory dwelling units, staff will probably recommend that you don't defer them altogether, but that maybe we look at reducing the amount because it is a lesser square footage that we're dealing with. So with that introductory, I will have Heather talk a little bit about how we updated the information in our packet.
And I'll just, let me break in with one thing. You held up those reports. If you go to the city's website and on the search at the very top, you type in system development charges, the first search result you will get will take you to a page which describes those SDCs and includes copies, PDF copies of each of those reports. So if you want to go back and review the reports that were done in 2017, 2018, around then, and see the methodology and how the numbers were calculated and, what the process is, it's very interesting. The transportation one, there are engineering books that assign values to all kinds of different things you could have in the community. Commissioner or Councilor Labonte, if we ever had a professional baseball stadium, based on the capacity of that stadium, we could figure out what the SDCs would need to be to put that in. So, or a movie theater or any other kind of thing. But a lot of what we have in our own stuff relates to housing because that is the kind of development we tend to see. And but as I was commenting to Councilor Blog before the meeting, there are kinds of housing and configurations of housing that really didn't exist in great numbers at the time that some of these reports were developed. So it's really a gap in what we did almost 10 years ago that needs to be re-examined, I think, to make it more thorough.
Yeah, and again, we don't have a lot of growth. We're not like a Happy Valley who probably brings in millions of dollars in system development charges. But you can see my Post-it notes, and in my opinion, these are projects that are either council goals or that we're working on where some of the money that we already have can be applied towards what we're trying to accomplish. So I'm very excited to work with Travis on this in the future.
Thank you. I would like to just go over the packet of information we provided, and it will look familiar because the information we provided in the analysis of our peer cities is much the same as what we went over with you earlier this year, although we did add water environment services from Clackamas County to make sure that you had a good picture of what that agency charges, as they do have rates that apply here in Gladstone. And they charge a 60% reduction on sanitary. In the analysis of the peer cities, it did kind of range in some ways about what charges were provided. Some didn't do all of their SDC charges. Some just did the utilities, sanitary, sewer, water, and did not do parks and transportation for various reasons. Maybe those capital improvement plans have larger projects on them and needed to be better funded. We talked about that at a staff level of what would make sense for Gladstone. And given our kind of limited administrative hours we have to apply to assessing SDCs and going through the analysis for those, we as staff are recommending that we do a blanket 50% for all of the different fees so that the calculation doesn't change from a staff level. It's just half of whatever they're already doing for an existing single family home. And then thinking about reporting back to council within a year, because is this a huge impact to the city's ability to provide these upgrades to these needed services? Or is it a few additional dwelling units that the city also needs that we're supporting and making it easier for property owners to be able to provide those additional housing units on their site? So some sort of, I guess it felt like a mid ground to say, let's do 50%. Let's not waive it entirely. Let's definitely consider not waiving it for short-term rentals because those are a different category. They're not providing needed housing. They're meant to, they are an economic generator for a property owner, but not in the way of providing the housing that we're looking to get out of this project. And then to check back in a year and say, is this working? Is it not? Does it need to be adjusted? So that's the proposal from the staff level. But happy to answer any questions about that.
I may.
Go ahead.
Hi, thank you for being here with the full regalia. How many, offhand, do you happen to know how many ADUs we put into, let's say, Gladstone last year?
So I review every single building permit. I should have pulled that information, but I would say between 6 and 8.
So we're talking, I mean, we're not talking a massive financial boom.
Not one a month.
Okay.
On average.
All right. That's good to know. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And that includes detached and basements, correct? Okay.
That's correct.
Councilor Garland?
Off the top of your head, do you know, and I'm not holding you hard and fast to this, what the average cost of that was per? Okay.
I'm going to actually look to Kristen Bowen, who actually processes those to see if we can get that answer.
And I am not holding you to.
So sometimes it varies. We do allow for water and sewer to be tapped on property, which in that case, it would substantially reduce the amount collected. If somebody were to tap water and sewer on property, it would be around $14,000. I have an ADU that went in somewhat recently where they did not have to upsize their water meter. And so they just tapped on property, but they wanted to run a separate sewer line. And that was just under $20,000. So it really, our system does allow for some variances depending on what they want to do with the property and how involved they want to be in management of it. So.
And so if you could clarify, though, when you talk about wanting to run their own sewer, the $20,000 charge was not amount that they paid to get that sewer in there. This was an SDC to the city to add to the capacity of the systems, the city's total sewer system. And they had a different amount, presumably, that involved the charge to add that extra sewer pipe, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. So that does not include anything as far as permitting or any work being done by a contractor. That's just the fee that the SDC, and it is charged on a square footage basis. So we follow the methodology from Wes. So this particular unit was 800 square feet. And so we calculated it on a reduced amount based on that square footage.
Can I ask what would make them do their own sewer as opposed to hook in with the house? I know it's a by property thing, but what are some of those variances?
This particular resident, because I had a conversation with them, so that's the only reason I know, is that their other home had some issues in their sanitary system and they were going to be upgrading it, but they were also considering doing some major reconstruction to the original home. So they figured it was better just to get the ADU in and possibly have that as a place to live. And so they wanted to run their own sanitary, so it didn't have any issues when the other one could. But there's not really any major benefit to it.
And if I may ask, when, let's say there's a conversation, someone wants to put an ADU and how often is it, a deal breaker when they find out exactly how much these fees will be? Are they like, oh, geez, never mind? Okay.
You want that or?
Sure. Go ahead.
We all have opinions on this one, but I will say that Kristen takes the brunt of the negativity from the developer. And yes, it can be a deal breaker. And this is a very complex process that takes her a lot of time to calculate. And then sometimes they don't even go anywhere. But yes, I would say it is a deal breaker, but I will let you two also.
We do know in just this year, we've had one homeowner who wanted to build out his basement into an ADU, and it's become a deal breaker for him. So he's not moving forward with it. And he came and testified at the last time when we presented this information. As far as others who have completely backed out, I'm not positive.
So a lot of times when I get phone calls regarding questions about ADUs, I give them a ballpark figure, and a lot of times it does stop them in their tracks.
Yeah.
I would say upwards of 20 that have just said, never mind, not interested.
And may I ask, that fee, is that something they would have to pay in one lump sum, or does the city offer like any plans for that?
I think in our code, it does allow for installment payments, but what we have found when we did try to work with a property owner about a year and a half ago was the interest didn't make it worth it. It was better just to pay it in whole, but that provision is allowed in our code for installment payments.
But more typically, they would pay before they're issued their building permit.
And based on books I've read about, the growing popularity of ADUs and people who've studied their, how many there are in places like California. One of the things that doesn't get talked about a lot is, basically illegal ADUs that because they know it would cost something, people just remodel their own basement, just do it quietly, maybe do things that do not require a permit. So if you leave out the gas connection to have a gas range in your cooking area of the ADU, and you rely on just a microwave oven or a plug-in countertop, cooktop, you could have almost a complete, what would qualify as an ADU without needing to meet certain requirements. And then there are the hidden ones where people just manage to do it without telling anybody and do it unpermitted. And the books I've read say in some areas they estimate that, a pretty substantial percentage of the ADUs that exist are unpermitted and unpaid for and all the rest. So again, when it becomes a deal breaker, that may be one factor for one reason why that happens occasionally. Again, I can't speak at all to the extent of that happening in Gladstone.
I agree with that. And I think the issue then becomes if someone's renting that space out, even if they're not doing it by getting a business license through the city, but, I'm renting it to my cousin's son or something, without a legal agreement or anything, but it doesn't make the space safe for habitation by a separate group, right? So if you're putting in that plug-in burner, are you exhausting it properly? Are you doing the things that you should be doing for a habitable space? So making this change that's sort of similar to other communities allows us to make what's right a little easier. So maybe from that perspective, it makes sense too.
Okay, Councilor Blatt.
I know that some cities will reduce further for commitment to affordable housing. Is that something that we've looked at all?
We did. And from an administrative standpoint, we're not sure staff can support that at this time. But we would definitely, be interested in doing this like first year and then circling back and seeing if that's a possibility. But
yeah, or maybe a pilot program with like 5 of them and we just kind of see how it goes, or, something along those lines.
Yeah, potentially in a future phase, maybe of this type of thing.
Yeah, I know in our packet, the city of Silverton is doing that. We have the former public works director from Silverton sitting here. Maybe he wants to weigh in why they were able to offer that.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So Silverton's a little different than Gladstone in the sense is it has a community development department that is staffed and the staffing there manages the program on the ADU side of things. On the public works side of things, where I came from, it was more or less where to spend the money at and kind of project wise. But the community development department ran this scale of a process basically on the reduced fees and stuff on the ADUs for low income housing and stuff. So I wasn't really involved with that portion. I just knew it took quite a bit of staff time to manage it.
And I think we're open to that. I think though that we want to try this initial period first. And then if we need to make further refinements, we can certainly discuss that as well.
Part of the reason we're doing this is that a few years ago, cities were required to do a housing needs analysis, basically to look at, what the projected growth in population is for a jurisdiction, how much land you have available for possible future housing development, and therefore how many new units you kind of need to bring into the system each year over the next 10, 15, 20 years, and what the income levels need to be for those houses. So you can't add just all, 3,000 square foot single household homes at a high price. You need to also have some homes for lower income potential new residents. And then the state has gone beyond that. And as our planning commission discussed last week, there's an office at the state now that sort of keeps track of housing growth at the city level and gives target amounts for cities to do, to try to add a certain number of new units. But cities then have to come up with some strategies for how can we make this happen? How can we get 10 new units of housing a year in Gladstone or more, whatever it is for whatever city? And a lot of the strategies have to do with financial incentives. So reduced SDCs would be one. A simpler permitting process is something that some cities look at. And there are a variety of things. We are scheduled to do our strategizing, but it's not for another year or two. Is that right? Do we have a target date on that?
I do believe it'll be in your next biennium of council goals, the 27 through 29.
Okay. And some of our neighboring cities have already worked on this and
Yes.
developed their strategy. So that is why you might see, for example, that in the city of Portland, they waive a lot of SDCs for new housing as a means of getting new housing in. But they have also accumulated millions of dollars in SDCs. When I visit, a new park in Portland that costs $12 or $15 million to develop, and they say, oh, they did it with park SDCs. It's wow. Oh, to have that resource would be great. But for us, this is the beginning of a conversation which will eventually be a broader conversation about strategies. And so this is one element of a possible strategy. Councilor Garlington.
I think Councilor Blog was first.
Oh, go ahead.
So in a weird thing of coincidence, the Oregon City Business Alliance had a discussion today about housing development and production. And one of the things that they brought up was that a timeline can really affect the cost of building these. And so I was just kind of curious, have we done, a timeline analysis? How long does it take to get one of these? How long, until they're done, that kind of thing.
That's a great question. From the city's perspective, so we contract with Clackamas County for the building permits, so a lot of it's out of our control. Kristen and I each review every single building permit, so every ADU that would come through, and we're given, I think, 2 to 3 weeks on the initial review to be able to provide comments back. Both of us review those multiple times a week, and neither of us has those lingering in our queues very long. So from a city perspective, we're moving those right along. It actually turns red if you don't hit your goal date, which makes me panic. So I never hit the red with mine if I can help it in any way. So from the city's perspective, it's a matter of days or weeks that the permits are with us, not months in any way. But then as far as sometimes it's somebody somebody building it on their own with maybe some plans they got off the internet, because they're not required to be architecturally drawn or anything like that. And so sometimes there's a lot of red lines from like the structural reviewers or the fire life safety reviewers, or they're not showing me the setbacks, so I can't tell, that sort of thing. So it would be hard to pin down a timeline because they do vary so much, but our review is quite quick.
So if you notice in the planning department report that we get each month in our first meeting of the month packet, there are often applications where you say the information was insufficient or it needs to be returned. So it's not a process where once they apply, it's automatically approved. It's, well, if you change these things, then you can get there. And that also adds to the timeline. So it's an example of what you said, that sometimes they start out with an idea that isn't going to work, but it could be modified.
Yes, and they get those comments back as soon as I enter them. So they're not even necessarily waiting. If Kristen needs a couple more days to do her SDC calculation, they have access to the comments that I'm making saying, can you please update these plans to show the height of the building and the setbacks? So they can be working on that concurrently.
Good. That's helpful. Councilor Garland.
Okay, I have a couple of questions here. So my first is off of your question, how long do they get once you stamp and they've given you a check? How long do they get to complete the build? And is it, this two-parter, is it the same as a house or is it shorter?
Yeah, building permits are issued for, I believe, 6 months at a time, but they can be extended. So once they pay their SDCs to the city, we're sort of out of it at that point, and it's being reviewed by a building inspector, the work that's being done. So they're getting notified by Clackamas County, hey, your permit's about to expire. Do you want to extend it? And they're able to do that. So
they get 6 months to complete a build.
Or extend their permit, but the SDC is forever. So if they pay it if they paid it in 2008 and they tear down what they built and rebuild, they don't pay another SDC. They have credit for what they already have on their site. So if you're paying for that capacity of development, that stays with the property if we have record of that.
Okay. And then Administrator Betts, spending SDCs, do we always have projects?
Yes, we always have projects.
Okay, sorry.
But because we can only use a percentage of system development charges to the project, we may not have the other money to complete the project.
It's like having a grant.
So, for instance, though, I was looking through, let me just pull the water, and because my little sticky note shows me that we are currently working on the Sherwood neighborhood water pipe replacement project. And according to our study, 4.36% is eligible for system development charge use. So about 103,000 can come out of our bank that we have reserved from system development charges towards that project. So we have a lot of projects. The ones that I'm focusing on are ones that are currently identified in council goals for that. So,
and those are just off the top of my head, those are properties that maybe could be eligible for ADUs and that kind of thing anyway. And if somebody ever said, why are you using it up on an old piece of property? Well, in order to keep them so that they too can have ADUs. But in our last packet that you had talked to us about, Heather, you talked about long-term rentals or month-to-month rentals versus a VRBO type of thing. So a couple of things that I had written down was, I like the idea of doing the reduction. I don't like doing it for a VRBO. It would, in my opinion, need to be something that it's a long-term kind of thing. So I would have that hard and fast rule. And then for some reason I wrote down 60%, but I don't know if it's because I wasn't sure of the prices, but I think that what the amount of monies that Kristen gave us, I could be okay with the other, as long as, again, they were a long-term rental, not a short-term, not a week to week thing, which I'm sure is more of an issue in beach communities and things like that. But you never know.
May I ask? And Mindy, I'm curious. I know, tourism in the city is nice to have people visit for a week or so.
Right.
What is your objection with that?
Because my thought is that the end goal is to create more housing, not create more hotel rooms.
And in our proposal, we are excluding short-term rentals, which means 30 days or less from this. So we're saying we agree with you that the reduction should not apply to short-term rentals.
Okay, thank you.
And we do distinguish between short-term rentals and housing stock in our development code with ADUs. We're allowed to require a parking space if we're in a parking area now, but with a short-term rental, we're not allowed to require a parking space for an ADU that's for housing. We also can require that the owner occupy either the ADU or the home if they're renting out the other piece to make sure that there's oversight of the property. And that's a deed restriction that we do require per our code that we can't do on a long-term rental.
I was wondering about that parking thing because, there are places that I see that might have room for an ADU, but they're on a cul-de-sac. Cul-de-sacs have such little parking. So you would require that to happen, huh?
If it was a short-term rental, we could, as long as it's not in an exempt area per our CFEC standards, our climate-friendly standards that we passed last year.
But you can't require it on on a long-term ADU, even if there's no more parking on that cul-de-sac?
Nope, cannot require parking with an ADU. That's part of the new state law about housing.
Okay.
If I may ask, so
Go
just
ahead.
out of curiosity, so let's say someone sets it up as a long-term rental and then like, oh, you know what? Maybe not. Is there a lever for that?
That's a good question. I mean, we do issue a business license for any kind of rental or tenancy in the city. Is there someone at the city getting on VRBO and Airbnb every month and seeing if we have these? I don't think so, but could we? Sure. And then could we go after that? Yep, but it has to do with city resources and things. But I have not heard of that as an issue. We haven't heard from neighbors that things are happening, that sort of thing. But if we did, we would certainly follow up.
We do pay pretty close attention to it, and it usually is neighbor complaint driven that then starts getting us involved with that. And we also looked because the state will audit that for cities, but the administrative charge to do that is too high. So I think we do a pretty good job of that, but a lot of times we hear from the neighbors first.
Interesting.
There are requirements associated with short-term rentals, which, people would try to sneak by because they should be collecting transient occupancy taxes. And as Councilor Garlington said, communities where tourism is the chief industry, like beach cities, this is a problem for them because, and you've heard it, I'm sure, at League of Oregon Cities conferences and meetings, because they see it as taking away potential homes for people who want to live in that community and giving it to people who are just there for a weekend and who, in some cases aren't the greatest neighbors. They leave big, bags of trash and bottles and things like that. So there are just quality of life complaints about short-term rentals. And even when they are just immaculately and perfectly done, it is one more unit that's not available for a person who would want to invest long-term and live in that community. So that's why a lot of cities make a distinction.
And to take it one step further, it's typically those communities that are tourist-based that have the wage jobs that would be appropriate to be renting that size of housing as well. And so then you're pushing your workforce out and requiring them to travel a greater distance to come serve the tourists who are taking that housing. So yes, that is definitely a concern in the cities that have those more tourist-based economies.
So at last month's meeting of the Clackamas County Business Alliance, I spoke about how in Gladstone, we are embracing the development of some tourism sites nearby involving our local rivers. The Willamette Falls Locks project. The two projects, one on the Oregon City side and one on the Westland side near the falls that are going in, the bridge that we have going over the river. So tourism in some small way, not a real big way, could be very essential to our economic development in Gladstone. And so it's important for us to look very seriously at how we regard, places for people to live when they come visit us. At the same time, we do have demonstrated shortage of affordable housing for people and workforce housing. I'll use that same term. And it's been a long time since we had any big size housing developments. The last time that a school had a 5-acre parcel of surplus property to develop housing was up the hill here on Glen Echo about 8 or 9 years ago, and it developed pretty large single-family homes. And then we had one large apartment development that came in around the same time period. But since then, there hasn't been much. So this infill, this ADU, is kind of the one way that we have, other than tear downs and rebuilds, of getting at least incrementally some more housing in our community. So I'm glad we're looking at this issue. I'm guessing from the lack of comments in opposition that we're in some agreement that a reduction of fees would be appropriate, that these requirements would not apply to ADUs used as short-term rentals for the reasons we've articulated. Anybody up for full waiver, or is that would that be a step too far? Okay, I kind of see that. It's very helpful to have this data. I tried to bring this up at a county meeting one time to see if C4 could do a unit on it, and all of a sudden here it was for us. And I thought, oh, rather than ask county staff to do all that, it's here for us. And other cities that have taken these steps before us, they don't want to waste their time teaching Gladstone how to do it. But thank you, Heather and staff, for your experience with this, your understanding of it. And I think, do you feel like you've had some direction of where we are policy-wise based on the discussion?
I do. And this will come back to you at the July 14th meeting, because that is when we will update our master fee schedule and we will put these reduced system development charges in there.
Okay.
I need one clarification.
Sure, go ahead.
I just want to get this sewer thing straight in my head that Kristen was talking about. If you're going to reduce the SDCs, do they still get that reduction if they're doing that bigger sewer project? Would this still fall into that, or only if they tap into the house?
They would. It would just be 50% of the higher cost if they're doing the bigger project.
So if it didn't pan out that they couldn't tap into their house, they would still get a reduction, although it would be higher. Am I right?
Right, because the fee would be higher.
And they would get that.
That's
and
correct.
I am going to be pretty hard on that 1 year thing. I want to hear in 1 year and make sure that we get a chance to really reevaluate it and see where it's going, and if we needed to do more to help our housing, or if we need to, I don't know, tweak it a little bit for administration, that kind of thing. So I really would like to stay on that 1 year review plan.
So that would likely be like August of 2027, since we'll be going into effect in August of 2026. Okay.
And I just want to say, to Kristen, thank you so much for what you sometimes have to go through with this. Our employees, city employees who are very public facing, like our utilities people who have to deal with people who have concerns about their bills, our courts people who have to deal with people concerned about their traffic tickets or whatever, and our SDC person who gets out a big binder and calculates the amounts and then has to give a figure to some, and some people just blow up. We're appreciate and understand that you sometimes are put in an uncomfortable situation, but I'm grateful to you for the expertise that you develop on this over the years and the consistency that you've been doing it, because it really helps us to understand and to have these figures here and to know off the top of your head the kind of the amount of funds we're looking at is very helpful to us in making this decision.
Thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome. Councilor Farley.
I had a curiosity question. If you put an ADU on your property, does it give you more value for the homeowner?
I believe so. Yeah. I think if you were going to sell it after you've added the ADU, you would have a higher return.
If that's the case, is there any opportunity, instead of having that front load cost of like a $20,000 fee or $30,000, could we back that towards the end of something, either giving them like a yearly tax, like a property tax, but be for the ADU itself? Or, hey, when you sell your home, if you build an ADU, you can enjoy it, fee friendly, but once you sell the home, we want the 20 or 30 grand it would have been plus interest or something. So there's no like barrier fee to incorporate that into your household, but you still have to pay the piper before the end. Is that an option?
I have not seen that in any other cities, and I think it's probably due to administration. We as a city don't have any real-time data of realty transactions, so we would then need to be tracking home sales in the city and that sort of thing. So I think for that reason, cities don't typically do that sort of thing. It's an interesting idea, but I think it just gets to be an administrative burden that's too high probably for most cities.
And as far as the value, I will give you one anecdotal example. There was a home in our neighborhood that for years was known as the zombie house, because an older couple who lived there moved out and basically just abandoned the house. And they had adult children who lived out of the country who did not want to come back and deal with it. So for upwards of 30 years, it sat unused, unoccupied. I think food was still in the cupboards. Raccoons and other vermin made their way into it. The roof was gradually, falling apart. And finally, the city and county took action by, failure to pay some taxes and fees or comply with some other things. They were able to, the county seized the property, auctioned the property, somebody bought it and, redid the roof, fixed up the outside, and now it is a home with a detached ADU to it. And when they put it on the market after working on it for 6 months or a year, they asked a price that I thought was way out of line for a home like that. It was much higher than what most of the homes in the other homes in the area, much larger or brand new homes were going for. But it was bought because it had that separate detached ADU, and now it's occupied by a young couple with like a preschool age child, and the parent of one of that adult couple living in the ADU, who's able to provide childcare for the child there. It creates a situation for a multi-generational family, not just an income providing property, but can often be something that really is a better family home situation that you would get if people living in separate communities or far apart in different homes. And I think that was part of the reason they were able to get the price they were asking, was that feature. So it definitely adds to the value. And, you've given us food for thought about how we can incentivize that. So good to think about. Councilor Garland?
Oh, sorry.
Okay. All right. I think we've got what we need. Thank you, Kristen and Travis and Heather, for being here tonight. And we'll go on with it from there. Anything else?
Thank you.
I'm going to dismiss the regalia. Thank you.
Peanut gallery.
All right. Some of you just came back from a League of Oregon Cities conference in Pendleton, I believe, right?
Yes.
So did we have a kind of an agenda on how we do this, or what's your idea?
There were three of us, but I would like to offer up Councilor Blaug and Councilor Garlington first to share their thoughts.
All right.
I'll go first. It's been quite a whirlwind since I got back. So with the plant sale and everything happening this weekend. And now I have a very large load of plants in my driveway that are taking up a lot of my time. But I want to say to the city, thank you for allowing us to continue what I think is growth in the job that we do in Gladstone. There's a lot of things that we do that are inner county that are super helpful. But when you get outside of our community and meet people and hear what other people are doing, again, I just say that it's so valuable to everything that we do. And I think the way that we think, you learn to kind of think outside the box and see and hear what other people are, how they're promoting their own cities. So that being said, I would have to say the biggest takeaway that I got from the conference this year was finding people to take our jobs. And not in a way that you want to just, you're looking to get out, but how do we set our seats up to entice others to come in and want to do what we do? Because I'm not doing this forever. I mean, it's a lot of work, and I think that other people could come in and have, other ideas and things like that. So never say never, but just finding, how do we pay it forward? How do we find those people? How do we let them know that sitting on a city council is not, it's a good place to be. You meet people, and work with people that you would never work with. So how you do that, one of the things they said is gather your crowd, build your connections, and take small steps. And by bringing people in to different organizations that go on throughout the city and county, I just found it really interesting how they got people interested in being part of that. So that was really good. One of the other things that they had talked about, a gal had talked about, so they had the city had a horrible problem with street cleanup. They could not get people to join in on every fourth Saturday of the month to come and, clean the streets, or clean your sidewalks. So this one lady who owned a shop in her downtown core swept her space and cleaned it all up and called it Sidewalk Cleanup Day. And she put pictures up and put out new chairs. And then the next month, she put the same thing out on the same weekday of the same month, every month, and cleanup day. And then all of a sudden, a few more shops were adding and a few more homes were adding. And by the time they had worked at it for a year, the city was cleaned up. It didn't take anybody to put it together. It was just simple pride in your space. And so I thought that was really an interesting way to get that together. I went to a breakout session that the City of Independence gave. Did you go to that one, Gabby? They talked about how they use social media. I'm telling you, It was hilariously inspiring. They, the videos that they do, the way that they get people involved. And if you get a chance to just browse YouTube, go to the City of Independence and watch some of the stuff that they do to inform, to engage, to promote all of the activities that happen there. They just do it all. Now, granted, I'm going to say they do have one person that's their entire job is media, social media, and that's all Did you gather that was all he did?
Yeah. And just so you know, I spied on you two at that session because I saw you in the front rows nodding your head and taking notes. So I'm like, I know this is going to come up. But I will tell you, I think it was probably one of the best sessions at the conference. They do have a dedicated communications director that's all that they do. And when I see things like that, I try to pull from what can Gladstone do. And I think with our new communications guide that we just recently completed, Haley in our office is already headed towards videos and really taking a lead on communications. And I think that we won't be far behind the city of Independence when you start talking about better engaging and getting to those 30 to 60-second videos of the work, because we're already doing great things in Gladstone. We just need to highlight it. We're also talking about the Gladstone Minute, where I will do a video to highlight after a council meeting, maybe the 3 things that the people need to know to get them to go and watch the meeting. So yes, I agree. It was a really informative, it was a fun session. And in government, we don't often get fun.
Yeah, and this definitely was. And the way they promoted their city was, it made you want to move to Independence. Really, just pick up your stuff and go, because that might be the greatest time you have. And they did say, interestingly enough, they show the good, the bad, and the ugly. Mm-hmm. They do not hide what's going on, a water break, got to close this portion of the city down for the day, all of that. They put it out there. So I was just, and they have a thing called Independence Vision 2040. I thought that was really interesting. I haven't gotten online to look at it, but I wanted to get on and see that. And then they talked about, at the very beginning, there was our speaker in the Saturday morning for the counselors talked about building a bridge. And then they talked about it a little bit more. And their rules for that were builds trust, encourages ownership, and enables community support. That's how they talked about it. So, and they believe that social media is the new town hall space. So, and then the other thing, I went to a breakout session, and they had a bunch of, they worked on the same type of thing that we had with the college, where the college came in and gave us a proposal. Mm-hmm. So one of their things was just to put that little ping in the back of your head. When writing grants, make sure that you have a line item for an intern or a student to come in and be part of that. How that would look, how that is, I don't know. That was just something that they said. And I thought, how many college kids need that on the job experience of some type? And wouldn't that, working in a city municipality, that's how some of these younger adults get started in working for cities, which, as we all know, getting people to work in the cities, in our cities and counties it's not the easiest job to have, and to keep people is, but if they're well educated as they're coming up the ladder and they've seen a piece of it, giving back might be just right where they want to be. So that was what I just took away. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Councillor Blau.
Yeah, the one that really got me was the start small. Sometimes it can seem overwhelming for big projects, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? And that really resonated with me for, some of the projects that we have here. I think government has this tendency to, because we're dealing with big projects, that the planning and all of those other things can sometimes get in the way of just getting started. And so it was really interesting to hear, about, little small communities that are taking little small steps that affect everybody's lives positively. So that was my only addition. That was a great summary.
There was a great example in that session from, I believe it's Tenesta, Pennsylvania, where they had a piece of property in their downtown that was undeveloped. And they tried for 10 or 12 years to entice a developer there with no luck. So they said, let's just grab a bunch of sheds and people started doing crafts and pop-ups in there. And if you Google it now, you will look, it ended up being one of the biggest attractions in that area. And they've kept it as sheds, and they've built facades for them. And it was just really creative on how do you get around government processes and just find a group of people to make things happen. So yes, that was a very good session too.
Go ahead.
What did you get to learn at the administrator manager Saturday morning?
The city manager's focus was really about cultivating the changes in council. And like you kind of touched on, is that there now seems to be a shift from people who have been involved with local government as a volunteer for many, many years, who decide they're ready to be an elected official, to people who come into the community and just go for it, like Councillor Farley, who haven't really come up through different committees. And that's a shift. And it's not a bad shift, but it's just understanding how to maneuver through that to onboard correctly so that you still have a cohesive council. And that's really what we focused on there. So it was really a good session. And I think everything that we are doing is in line. We have council goal setting sessions. We identify areas of common interest. We have rules and team agreement on how we treat each other during our meetings. And so for me, coming out of the conference, it kind of rejuvenates me and reaffirms to me that we're doing some great things in Gladstone. We don't have the crisis or the dysfunctions that other cities in the state of Oregon are going through. So be proud of who you are and what you're doing, and let's just stay on that track and get things done.
One more small thing.
Sure.
I just wanted to, if anybody ever watches this, to give a shout out to Commissioner Cindy Timmons from Deschutes County, Councilor Maria Duran from Hermiston, Mayor Alex Johnson from Albany, and Trustee Corinne Sams from the Umatilla tribes, who graciously came and did a panel on learning leading with learned experience, was our title of our breakout session that Mayor McGriff from Oregon City and I and our team, her People of Color Caucus and the Women's Caucus, got it put together with some very interesting questions. There were some tears in the audience. There was a lot of good questions from people on how they maneuver their positions as underrepresented people and communities. And Trustee Sams from the Umatilla tribes spoke absolutely eloquent about her heartfelt desire to make sure that her people in the tribes that the treaties held up and the people were given what was due to them, and in an honest way. She talked about some of the programs that she did with some of the youth that are happening right now. They have, from what I understand, one of the strongest youth councils on the Umatilla Council. And that came up from her one of her ideas to get that done. They do these Wednesday night things where they bring the youth together and do some work together on dancing and their languages and just other things that they do, as passing down their history and that with their youth. So what they're doing to bring their youth together and what these other communities are doing in order to serve as underrepresented people was so touching and just so overwhelming at times. But it was just a beautiful, beautiful session for everyone. And I want to thank them again for coming And thank you, Counselor Bog, for hanging out. And I know we were getting late in the day.
All right. Well, thank you to all three of you for attending and representing the city, bringing back some ideas, bringing back some inspiration, bringing back, an awareness that sometimes other cities have it tougher than we do, and we can be pretty proud of how we are, as Counselor or as Commissioner Administrator Betts said. But also that we can learn a lot from other cities that are doing things in a new and different way, and that can be very inspiring to us. So that's the purpose of these kinds of conferences, of getting together 240 other cities outside of our own that are part of this, and some big, some small, some facing greater challenges than us, and some responding in new and creative ways. So I'm glad we had that exchange. So I think that's all we have on our agenda. We have a regular council meeting scheduled for Tuesday, May 12th, and then a work session on May 26th. Some of the, as you know, we had some items on last month's agenda that we pulled off because the rest of the world doesn't always run on a second Tuesday of the month schedule. But we will have a pretty heavy agenda in May. But I hope we can get through it and make some good decisions and continue with progress on a lot of our important goals. So we are adjourned at 6:31 p.m.